And we are live.
Okay, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the special meeting of council for Tuesday, June 7th, 2021. Before we begin this gathering, I'd like to acknowledge the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. Tomorrow at noon, in front of City Hall, there will be a small ceremony by the Niagara Region Native Center, who will be doing a ceremony and a removal of the children's shoes that have been placed there as a memorial to the 215 Indigenous children that were uncovered at the Kamloops Residential School. And it will be a small ceremony, but it will be live cast on Facebook, live streamed. And so they're encouraging the community to participate in that way. They're not asking for people to come out in person to support, but they're asking people to join in on this very special ceremony as a community gathers to be a part of this ceremony. There will be the removal of the shoes as well as a raising of the flag. And so that'll take place beginning at noon. So we have an agenda in front of us today. It's regarding our strategic plans. There's only really one item on the agenda. So I just need a motion to move the agenda. Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Townsend, all in favor. That's carried, and there's no conflicts of interest. And so we do have a presentation by Miss Liz Palmieri from Liz Palmieri and Associates. And Liz has been a facilitator, consulting on the status of the 2019-2028 City of St. Catharines Strategic Plan. And she has gone through a very extensive review, both with the senior leadership team and with council, doing individual meetings with councillors, ward meetings with councillors in terms of both councillors at the same time. And then tonight we'll have an opportunity to have a final presentation. Liz is well known to members of our community. She has been a key architect of the Niagara Community Foundation. She has established herself as a strong thought leader in St. Catharines, Niagara, held in high regard for her strategic planning process. And she's helped a number of organizations develop strong, very clear, and very focused strategic plans. And so it's been a great privilege to work with Liz as part of this process. And I'm sure I echo the compliments of council, being able to work with her as we look to the update of what was our strategic plan as a council. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Palmieri, and she's going to take us through a presentation, and then we'll have a final discussion of council, and we'll hopefully be able to move forward with this updated plan. Ms. Palmieri.
Thank you very much, Mayor Sendzik. If the slide presentation could be put up, that's great. Thanks, Maureen. First, I want to thank everybody. You can just go to the first slide. That would be great. Mayor Sendzik has already gone through the process, but first I just want to thank everybody for the generosity of spirit that they demonstrated through this whole process. It was a really, I found it very helpful. I found people felt very comfortable, especially given that everything was held in confidence. But there is a deep caring for this community, both by staff and board. And council, and it was really heartening as a citizen to be able to take part in this. So thank you very much. Mayor Sendzik quickly went over the review process. There's one thing though I wanted to put into context. Staff did the update of the strategic plan in February, and we are now in June. So some things have happened since that update Some plans have been already presented to council. So there's just a little bit of a time lag, but certainly, so my comments relate more to, and the feedback from council and staff relate more to that report that was prepared in February. So as Mayor Senzik said, there was a 5-part process, and we're kind of at the end of that process tonight. One of the things that I'm not going to do is go objective by objective in terms of the status report. You folks have that report. I'm just going to talk about sort of my observations under each of the pillars in the plan, as opposed to go into a lot of detail on each of the objectives, because you are provided with that information already from staff. So if we could go to the next slide. And in hopefully keeping with the desire that this meeting is not a long meeting, I'm going to move through these slides relatively quickly. First, I'm just going to give some general observations. Your current plan is really a plan of plans, and that's not a bad thing. But those plans are really going to help to inform the work of the city going forward. And it was really important that that planning be done. And it's amazing how much planning has been done given the interruption in the work of the city because of the pandemic. I've observed, and it was commented on by many people that I interviewed, that this plan is somewhat tactical as opposed to strategic. There are some sort of overall, your pillars are your themes. Those goals in some ways are really vision statements for what you want to achieve with those pillars. So for those of you that are more involved in planning, it's a document that certainly informs the work of the city going forward, but in some ways it's much more tactical than strategic. Everybody that I spoke to, certainly the members of council, liked the progress report on the current plan. However, they would like more regular progress reports, and I'm going to make a recommendation you probably already read with regards to having more regular updates on how the work of the plan is going forward. There is also a desire to see some benchmarks or metrics to measure the success in goals. And in the appendix, I've given some sample reports from cities of similar population as the city of St. Catharines on benchmarking and metrics that they have included in their strategic plans that may be models that you could implement. Then there's also a desire that the plan's goals should be reviewed annually and updated as circumstances arise. Certainly with the impact on the pandemic, it affected the timeline for the plan's implementation, but there could be other situations or circumstances that occur that could impact the plan moving forward. And having a regular review of the plan's goals and updating them makes sense going forward. Next slide, please. So the economic prosperity strategic goal is to support the city's commitment to building and growing a diverse and resilient economy through fiscal responsibility, urban regeneration, and collaborative partnerships. Basically, all objectives are either completed or in progress, as at the writing of the report in February. Now, there are a number of plans that are being developed, and these need to be reviewed to see how they will inform this goal's vision to build a strong and resilient community. There was some discussion around that these plans are part of the core business of the city. So why do they need to be included in a strategic plan when that's part of the core business? You'll need to sort of have a conversation about that, but they certainly are moving forward in the development of them. And some objectives have many components. So there was a suggestion that perhaps there needs to be some staged completion dates on when these objectives, these components will be achieved. And just a small suggestion that the asset management plan should include fire and fleet service assets as well. Next slide, please. And this is kind of a common comment or observation on all the plans that are being developed is what's going to be the impact on the future operations of the city going forward and your relationship and collaboration opportunities with regards to financing and jurisdiction. I'm not familiar with all of the relationships with the various levels of government, but certainly there are great opportunities for better collaboration, not better, more collaboration going forward. But these plans need to see how they're going to inform your collaboration and relationships going forward. A small suggestion about extending the economic development strategy into 2023, especially considering the impact of the pandemic and on the economy of businesses in St. Catharines. And a suggestion about consider incorporating the research and development of a municipal development corporation into the current plan. And if so, what resources would be required to do that, both human and financial resources. So if we could move to the next slide, which is about social well-being strategic goal. And this goal is to build and support strong, inclusive neighborhoods that provide high quality of life for residents of all ages. Again, most of the objectives are either completed or in progress, with only at the time of writing, the Parks Policy Plan was yet to be started. Again, a lot of these objectives are very tactical and focused. So consideration in the next plan going forward be to make them more strategic. As I said, some of these objectives are actually tactics for a more broader strategy. Now I know the Transportation Master Plan has since been received. I don't know where it is in the whole decision-making process, but you'll need to have a discussion about the impact of this plan again on city's operations and on the residents' quality of life going forward. Same goes for the recreation facilities and programming master plan, as well as the parks policy. And as I said, it's kind of a general comment about all the plans. It's once you've got these plans in place, it's really how are they going to impact those pillars and the quality of life in the city going forward. Let's go to the next slide here. So the environmental strategic goal, which was adopt innovative approaches and continue responsible community planning and decision-making that balances growth, enhances quality of life, manages emergencies, and minimizes the environmental impacts of climate change. And I know I read that the climate change adaptation plan says in the report it's being developed. I understand the draft plan was presented to council within the last few weeks. Is that correct? Mayor, if you could just nod your head. Good. So a lot of these objectives have been completed or in place, and there's a few in there that have not, at the time of writing, had not been identified as an anticipated completion date. There was some suggestion about amending the goal to make it more broader and less specific, something like reduce the city's negative impact on the environment. The city may also want to consider putting an societal environmental lens on every aspect of its work. And there's a reference there to an OECD report. This may be included in the document that has been presented. I don't know because I didn't look at it. And also the city may want to, I call it the action plan, but it's the adaptation plan, should include benchmarks, perhaps similar to those used by Prince George. Again, a community of somewhat similar size. I think they might be a little bit smaller, but they had very tangible benchmarks in there in terms of moving their climate change plan forward. So, I mean, I'm a huge fan of learning best practices from what other municipalities are doing as opposed to reinventing the wheel. And if this is a desire going forward, there are some great examples out there, which I'm sure your senior staff and council members are aware of. And next slide, please. So the last pillar is the cultural renaissance strategic goal. And again, most of the objectives are completed or in progress, except the update to the Inspire St. Catharines culture plan. However, that is starting to be looked at. I understand that there was a staffing situation around with respect to moving forward on that. Again, the wording on this objective is very tactical. And the work undertaken to date, while it's important, needs to relate to the plan, which is yet to be updated. So it's kind of like the cart before the horse in some ways. And going forward, perhaps creating a planning document that has, with all due respect, a bit more of a flow to it. I find actually putting numbers beside the goals and objectives and tactics actually helps in terms of seeing how one thing feeds into another. Next slide, please. So just general comments on the plan's implementation and the staff and council's commitment and sense of pride in it. Virtually across the board, there was support from council and staff for the strategic plan. There was really a good desire and a real generosity of spirit about working collaboratively to move the plan forward. It gets frustrating at times. I mean, it gets frustrating with a lot of stuff, especially with given how the pandemic has impacted everything. But there certainly is a strong desire to work collaboratively, and there is a great deal of respect for each other, which does not necessarily happen in other municipalities. There was lots to be proud of, and there are 2 pages in the report. I didn't detail them, but when I asked the question, there's lots to be proud of which has been accomplished, especially given that the pandemic, the last 16 months, has really impacted the work. But a lot of stuff has happened still at the ward level, and also the work that's happened on creating some of these larger plans. There's a good commitment still to moving forward to becoming a compassionate city. Everybody was very proud of how the city has handled the impact of the pandemic on the residents and on the operations of the city, and how city staff have really raised the bar. I'm going to get the tense wrong, but certainly come to the table with how they are working and adapting the ways in which they work because of this unprecedented situation. And people are, as I said, I've mentioned this before, really proud with moving forward on creating so many of the master plans that are going to help to inform the work of the city strategically going forward. If you could go to the next slide. So just a few recommendations here, and it's not new. I think I've mentioned a number of them already, but consider developing key performance indicators. How are you going to know how well you are doing if you don't set some indicators to measure your success? Perhaps the committee of the whole, as in today, should review the progress of the plan on a semi-annual basis. I was surprised, with all due respect, that the update that was presented done on the plan in February was the first since the plan had started. I'm more used to organizations doing semi-annual updates. You don't want any surprises to occur if things are not happening, and you need to be able to mitigate any initiatives that are being impacted negatively for whatever reason. A number of councillors talked about the fact how much value they received in the committee of the whole, members of council joining budget committee in the fall. Really was an opportunity to dive deep on some of those items in the budget, as opposed to doing it at a council meeting. It just, so that when it finally came to council, there was a general consensus, some discussion, but a general consensus on moving that budget forward. I would ask you to consider reviewing the current committee and task force terms of reference to ensure that they align with the plan. There's nothing more frustrating than being on a committee that doesn't have any relationship to what is outlined in the plan or being accomplished in the plan. Some of the committees are advisory committees to staff, some are committees to council, but really I would suggest just to do a review of the terms of reference of those committees to make sure that there is alignment and to make sure that nothing is missing. And I'm going to, this is a duplicate comment, so if you could go to the next slide. Improve communication with respect to funding opportunities and other matters that align with the plan. With so much going on, with so many different balls in the air, there was a desire to hear about potentially some funding opportunities a bit earlier than close to the deadline. It's just a small operational communication challenge that arises at times. But if there's a way to improve some of that communication, it would be certainly beneficial all around. And this is something that I observed, that there was no pillar that talked about people, that talked about the people that are working for the city, about improving the internal capacity of the city. And I found that unusual, in that a lot of organizations quite often have a plan about improving capacity of an organization. And your plan is very visionary in the work that you're doing, but I didn't find anything that talked about what you are doing to strengthen the internal capacity of the city and its employees to move forward. So that was just something for consideration. And then consideration for a new format for your plan going forward. I think your current goals, with a little bit of massaging, are really wonderful vision statements for each of those pillars. They are really an overarching vision for what you want to accomplish. Some of them are a little tactical, but still generally they are really quite visionary. Then your goals can be more strategic over a 10-year period. Then at the end of each council's term, in your case, in the fall of 2022, you establish at that point new 4-year objectives going forward. I don't know about you, but I would think creating a new strategic plan or creating objectives with a brand new council or new members of council might be a little bit challenging for those new members of council. Whereas if at the end of this council, you establish some 4-year objectives going forward, then you can do a review of those after the first year once plans have been implemented. They could be tweaked, they could be changed, but at least they've got some direction for staff then to operationalize, including tactics, benchmarks, timelines, and metrics. So it's just making the plan a little bit more strategic, visionary, but then to let the staff really get into the operationalizing of the plan. And then in the report, but it's not in my presentation, I've included some links to some other municipalities that have different strategic plans in terms of if you're looking for different formats for your plan, included the city of Guelph, Barrie, Cambridge, and Sudbury. So there might be some lessons learned in terms of how to adapt your plan, should you choose, to a new format moving forward. So that's the end of my report at this point. I'll pass it back to you, Mayor Sendzik. As I mentioned, in terms of, I didn't want to respond or to go through detail by detail on each of the objectives, because that information is in the plan. And certainly you can determine how you want to deal with that going forward.
Thank you very much, Liz. And again, I think you've given us a strong overview, and clearly your experience on strategic planning development is coming through as you've been able to rightly analyze some of the areas of opportunity that we have in front of us as a council. So we'll open the floor. If I know each councillor has had opportunities to work with Liz. So if there's any lingering question that you have left over, you can do that here, and then we'll turn it over to maybe have a quick staff update as well. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. Palmieri. Thank you for your work and your presentation. In terms of setting the benchmarks and the KPIs, this is supposed to be council's plan and not staff's plan. How would you envision council coming up with those KPIs? We do need staff support. And then maybe this is a question for staff. I am interested in that 5th pillar. I actually think that's a really good idea. And I do sometimes think there's a disconnect between, our vision as counselors, but then, needing to rely on the staff internally who basically do all the work for us. And I think that's a really good point. And our staff are very critical. So how would you envision if we
So Councillor Porter, I would suggest that this is something that council and the senior staff work on together, just because I know it's your plan. But I think I'm a strong proponent of the partnership between senior leadership team and members of council. So, and again, looking at some of the, and because it's the first time potentially, just select a few key ones, because it can get quite spending a lot of time sort of doing the measurement. So maybe it's a phased in approach that's done. You know, what are the key KPIs for each of the areas, but do it in concert with the senior staff, senior leadership team.
Okay, I think that's a good idea, and I hope we move in that direction. Developing KPIs is actually hard work. And I would like us to start in that direction, but I don't think we don't have to come up with all of them in the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Townsend, you're up.
Thank you. I guess my question was actually along the lines with Councillor Porter with this fifth pillar. From my perspective, part of we meet with our CAO, kind of provides us those updates. Senior directors provide that for us. I'm just trying to envision what that fifth pillar might look like, because there's a very fine line between having, I think, councillors or the mayor, getting involved in staff decision making when it comes to the human resources and the job aspects of it. I'm just trying to get, because again, it's a fine line between how involved do councillors and the mayor get with the staff.
Good point. I think a lot of your role is ensuring that certain things are in place. And I don't know exactly what is in place in the area of staff support. I can recall a few years ago, there was a lot of work done about making City Hall there's a word for it, much more people friendly. That was an internal processes that was organized by staff, but that was a direction from council. And that related to an interaction with members of the public and city staff. So there could be some broader themes, and it's just to ensure, from a counselor's perspective, ensure that these things are in place. I mean, I don't know, because I haven't got the experience of working with that, but I'm, certainly with some nonprofits, which I have more experience with, it has to do with, governance. It has to do with policies that relate to certain functional areas, ensuring that those things are in place. And if there is a role for council to play in that, I understand strategically the difference between an operational role and the councilor's role. It's more around policy and plans, but specifically, I don't know anything in particular that I could suggest, but it's there could be some themes that would emerge. And I think going back to the CAO and looking at what other themes have emerged. I mean, right now you're dealing with staff that is going through incredible strain. How is the mental health? What are you doing around the mental health of your staff to deal with the pandemic? Is there a strategy around that? Strategy could be ensure adequate supports for employee mental health. I mean, that sounds like a tactic, but you know what I mean. But that's something that has arisen since the development of the plan.
Okay, thank you.
So building on that, Councillor Townsend, I don't know if it was this term, but I think last term, I know council had approved a corporate-wide employee survey. And the survey took place, but I don't think we've had an update to council about the results and is our staff satisfied with the employee morale? Is there areas we have to work on? How do we do that? And so it's all strategic, and what the direction would be, it's our role as an oversight. We're looking at how, from a macro level, the employees feel about working in the city of St. Catharines and where the areas of concern are. Staff's job is to say, here's what we're doing to work on this. Here's what we're doing to work on that. And our job is to really look at that oversight role.
I'll just quickly jump in. I guess like the confusion for me is I kind of always understood that would be kind of the role of the CAO to bring that to council to say, these are the challenges that we're having, and then council would make that decision. Because I know we did put in a few months last year at some point, the additional, like some mental health funding. I can't remember, anyways, it was a while back, but that's kind of the understanding I had from our role, was that whoever the CAO is now would be Mr. Oakes, would come to us and say, these are the issues that our staff are facing. What can council, what kind of decision? But again, good conversation, and I appreciate the idea. Thank you.
Councillor Kushner.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Liz, in the report, you used color coding to represent the status of the reports. And were there any surprises? You indicate there are only 2 red areas, which means that the objectives have not been started.
At the time that that interim report was done in February, that was the case.
Okay, were you surprised at how few were
Yes, especially given the pandemic.
not? Okay, thank you.
It speaks to the dedication of the staff and members of council about still moving things forward in trying times.
Okay, and the 2 that were not started, did you look at the reasoning for them not having been started?
I think it had to do with staffing. Let me just get the report, but I'm pretty sure it had to do with not having a cultural supervisor in one department to get the plan going.
Right.
But given the number of objectives in that plan, I was not surprised at all. I was surprised that there were so few red areas.
Yeah, well, that's good news. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Porter for a second time.
Yeah, sorry for jumping in again. I just wanted to point out Guelph strategic plan, they have 5 areas, and their area is not about people. It's really about people. It's not just about employees, but there's a focus on employees. It's working together for our future, and it's about hiring engaged, skilled, and collaborative employees. And the measures include like an employee engagement index, but also a citizen satisfaction measurement as well, digital transaction. So those are some of the key performance indicators. This area is like, if we were to do a 5th pillar, it would be about people, including the staff, but also this
Resident satisfaction.
satisfaction of interacting with our staff first and foremost. So I just want to throw that out there. I do really think it's a good idea to be able to think about people in the organization and people first, whether it's our residents or our employees, and start measuring that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hope you can hear me okay. I'm having internet problems today, but just following up on what Councillor Kushner asked, I'm sure Director Christie can provide an update, but we have made some significant progress since that update in terms of hiring a cultural services supervisor.
Yeah, I don't think we need an update from we've seen that. So that's a good point that you made, though. Okay. Okay, in terms of the recommendations, so Ms. Palmieri has provided recommendations. So if Maureen, if you can bring that back up to the screen, that last page, or it's in our report, but just for the public to see as well. What I'm looking for is some interest of council. So we've got the recommendations in here.
There's the slide before that as well.
Yeah. So we can approve the presentation as presented, and we could make a motion to approve the recommendations and then direct the staff to come back in and provide more detail around our recommendations if we're in agreement of all of them, which some of them don't need much action, like the budget committee, which is already being established to have budget committee of the whole starting in the fall. So that's already a check mark. But if you want to do this as a block, we can approve the strategic presentation and include the recommendations in our approval if there's nothing in there that is uncomfortable for any councillors. Would someone like to put that on the floor? I apologize because I can't see the hands.
I can see Councillor Dodge's hand.
Councillor Dodge, would you like to put that on the floor?
I can do that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And seconded?
I'll second it, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Councillor Phillips. Okay, so is there any further discussion on this? There will be a further discussion when the recommendation report comes back from staff, as they'll be getting into some more detail about this and providing some context. Councillor Porter?
Yes, we don't have to decide this today, but I think I would look to staff to come back with some suggestions to figure out how to do some of this. So we don't have to decide right now, but if we are moving forward with that fifth pillar, we're probably going to need to have another meeting, and then maybe it's asking the mayor and maybe the budget chair and a couple of other councillors to work briefly on a couple of key performance indicators, like through a brief short-lived task force. But I'd look to staff to come back with some recommendations in the future. I don't want to decide all this tonight.
Okay. Liz, is that in your recommendations? Is that pointed out in one of your recommendations? Because I can only see the one screen right now.
I presumed that this would go to staff for review and council to determine which of the recommendations and how they are going to be implemented.
Okay, so can we add to Mr. Oakes? Can we add that part that was brought forward by Councillor Porter?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, that's exactly what we had intended, to basically bring a report back to provide an overview of council along the various recommendations. As council will recall, the discussion that we had, that I brought forward through the interview process, a lot of that was, having better alignment with the strategic goals of council and some of the work plans that staff are working towards. So the intent would really be to bring back a more robust report from my perspective, that aligns with the strategic goals and objectives of council, but also sort of highlights how staff both interpret and how we're actually going to take the next several years to help see this to fruition. I'd remind, these vision documents are more than 2-year, 3-year plans. And it's really the various steps that we have to take to move it forward. So yes, we're definitely going to be able to bring a report back on all of these recommendations. And I'll put some additional information on how that connection between the staff component, as you know, we're 95% of what we do is based on our staff and across the entire corporation. So in order to achieve any strategic objectives, we have to rely on our staff, and that's my responsibility. That's the responsibility of all of SLT, but we need to do it in a way that's going to align with council and recognize that from a governance standpoint and in objectives, we are aligning and positioning what we do at staff with the objectives of council.
Okay. And just one final question, if I can, to Mr. Oakes. When would we anticipate this coming back? So we're in June now. Is this a September report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, we can bring it back for most likely. I would suggest mid-September. This is something that I see as a bit of a work plan for myself to help manage through the strategic plan, but also starting to set up some of our internal processes to align, whether it's budget, whether it's asset management, our transportation master plan with the broader objectives of the strat plan. So I would target September for sure.
Okay, so we got a motion on the floor to receive the presentation and then also to approve the recommendations and have staff come back and do a more fulsome report and a work plan that would come in mid-September is the target date. So if there's no further questions on this, just I'll look to the clerk for a vote.
Counselor Dodge,
Yes.
Counselor Phillips,
Yes, thank you.
Counselor Cisco,
Yes.
Counselor Townsend,
Yes.
Counselor Kushner,
Yes.
Counselor Littleton,
Yes.
Counselor Miller,
Yeah, got a thumbs up. Yeah.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes,
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Porter,
Yes.
Counselor Sorrento,
Yes.
Counselor Williamson,
Yes.
and that's carried. Oh, and Mayor Sensick,
Yes.
and that's carried.
Yeah, I just want to, again, on behalf of council, thank Ms. Palmieri for this work. And again, we can't speak enough about how important it is for us to have a strategic plan. And I also want to thank senior staff for undertaking this review, as well as council for this unanimous support for it moving forward with the recommendations that were included. So good work to everybody involved. And let's move on to the next agenda. Take care, Liz.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now resolve into the St. Catharines Hydro special meeting of the shareholder. And I call upon Councillor Matt Harris, Chair of the Hydro Board, to preside over this portion of the meeting. So I can now go mute.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to ask the deputy clerk or the corporate secretary, are the Elektra representatives on hold or on the line or connected?
They are connecting in. Melanie from Elektra is here, as well as Blair. They're turning their cameras on as they join the meeting.
Okay, so I guess we can get started then. So to get started, this is the City Council as the shareholder for St. Catharines Hydro Inc. special meeting of the shareholder. So the first item on the agenda is to call the meeting to order. Item 1.1, waiver of notice of the special shareholder meeting. Can I have a motion, please? Moved by Councillor Garcia, seconded by Councillor Kushner. Be it resolved that the notice of the special shareholder meeting be waived. All those in favor? I'm going to assume that all are in favor unless I hear no. So all those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. Adoption of the agenda. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I see hands raised by Counselor Sorrento and Counselor Porter.
Okay, moved by Councillor Sorrento, seconded by Councillor Porter. Be it resolved that the agenda for June 7th, 2021 special meeting of the shareholder be approved. Can I just point out to the corporate secretary that Councillor Williamson, there's an error in the operations. There's some spelling and a grammatical error that needs to be changed. And if I could forward that, so could we still approve the motion and note that those changes need to be made?
And that's just in the report for the business plan?
Yeah.
That's fine. As long as it's just grammatical, it doesn't change the intent, that's no problem.
Okay. All those in favor? And that's carried. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing and hearing none. Item number 4, the in-camera agenda. I'm going to look to the corporate secretary for the reason of moving in camera.
So there's a motion to go in camera pursuant to the Municipal Act Section 2I, a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board, which if disclosed could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group of persons, or organization. By attending the in-camera session, each member of council and the members are acknowledged that their obligations under the Code of Conduct, including responsibilities related to confidentiality of the closed session materials and discussions, remain the same as if they were physically present at the meeting. This includes that members of council are not permitted to record the proceedings and that they must ensure that no other person can see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place. We also have a number of representatives from Elektra on the call that have requested to come into the in-camera meeting to discuss the items being brought forward by Elektra.
Perfect. Can I have a motion to move in camera? Moved by Mayor Senzik, seconded by Councillor Dodge. All those in favor? And that's carried. We will now be addressing item 2.1 on the in-camera agenda.
Okay, so Maureen, the council coordinator, will move us over to a breakout room, and this is to discuss Elektra unanimous shareholder agreement proposed revisions. So if you just want to hold tight for a few seconds, and we'll move you over to the breakout room.
You don't seem to be moving.
It's a big group of people to move over today, so we have to manually select every person to move over. So the more people we're moving, the longer it takes. So thank you for your patience.
I still can't hear them.
Now you're
Are we all back?
Yes.
Yes, we are most. I
Could-
think we're all back now. Yes.
Could I ask Kristen that you put the motion up on the screen? And can I have a counselor that's willing to move the motion? Counselor Phillips, seconded by Counselor Cisco. Was your hand up, Cisco? It's moved by Phillips, seconded by Counselor Cisco. And I believe everybody's read the recommendation or the motion. Are there any questions before I call the vote? Hearing none, seeing none. Could I look to the deputy clerk to call the vote, please?
Counselor Phillips,
Yes.
Counselor Cisco,
Yes.
Counselor Dodge,
Yes.
Counselor Porter,
Yes.
Counselor Kushner,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Miller,
Yes.
Counselor Littleton,
Yes.
Counselor Townsend,
Yes.
Counselor Williamson,
Yes.
Counselor Sorrento,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes,
and Mayor Sensick.
Yes.
And that's carried.
that's unanimous. Item 4.2, remuneration for members of boards and committees. This report was referred to the shareholder by council at the May 31st, 2021. I'm just going to ask that the representatives from Elektra stay on and just mute because they're coming back up shortly in our meeting. So could I look to Councillor Littleton to present her motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion that I'm putting on the floor is that at the beginning with the major, well, I just wanted to say, this has nothing to do with the chair of this meeting, Councillor Harris, nor the other members of the board, the council representatives. It is nothing to do, it's no reflection of the work that they do or anything like that. This is simply looking at remuneration of one board, and I think it's a lot. And so I have suggested that beginning with the new term of council that begins December 1st, 2022, remuneration for directors of the St. Catharines Hydro Board be $750 per annum per director, plus $205 per meeting, and $1,000 per annum for the chair, plus $205 per meeting. And that moving forward, remuneration be adjusted annually based on the same metrics used for council for this board. Can I speak to it very quickly, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Thank
Do you
you.
have a seconder, Councillor Littleton?
Councillor Porter, Councillor Miller, it doesn't matter, Councillor Miller.
Councillor
I'll second
Porter?
it, sure.
Miller?
Yeah, Miller.
So essentially, when I was reading the reports, it says, you know, the holdco does not undertake any business operations directly. It's essentially a governance body which flows dividends from its subsidiaries, which is Genco and Elektra, through to the city. So it does a valuable job, and the people that would sit on that board, I would imagine, should have some not only interest in hydro, but it's an important role that they play. So that's my reasoning for not getting rid of the compensation entirely, or the remuneration entirely. But what I'm stuck on is when I look at the amount that is currently paid in 2019 at $6,456 a year for a director, plus $205 a meeting. If there were 10 meetings in a year, for example, the total remuneration would be $8,506 a year. That's 34% of our entire council wage. So that's what I'm looking at. Again, it's not a reflection of the councillors that are sitting on the board, past, present. I don't want to talk about any of that. It's not. And additionally, the chair receives $8,800 a year. If again, there were 10 meetings, we'd be looking at and adding $2,000. That's $10,851, which is 43% of our council salary for sitting on one committee. And I know that if I use the budget committee, for example, I know the chair of that committee does a lot of work as well. So I thought, I'm going to bring this forward. I think it's a remarkable amount of money that is paid, and I think that any money we could save and be put towards, Parks and Rec would be a great place to put it. But I want to kickstart this discussion because I think it's an important one that we have to have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. I'll open it up to questions. I have Councillor Cisco first, Miller and Townsend. So Councillor Cisco.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate Councillor Littleton bringing this forward. And with that in mind, I'm making a motion to refer to staff. And I've sent the language through of the referral. It was my intention with respect to this report in the first place. And the referral would basically be to collect information about comparable hydro board members in other municipalities, which we have here, but also information about comparable municipalities and how they deal with outside boards and commissions and standing committees and how they pay those members, as well as how they fund the payments for those committees and members and hydro board members, and what options would look like for payments if we to decide to go down that path. And I did send the language through, but it essentially encapsulates what's in this report, but also asks for additional information so we can deal with this issue holistically. And I appreciate that Councillor Littleton wants this to start in the next term of council, so I think we have time to be able to look at everything together. And I think it's important. I think we have to have this conversation, and Councillor Littleton raised a lot of good points, but I think there's more to it, and making the decision just with this, we're making decisions in isolation. And I think it's better if we collect all of the information, and that's the motion to refer at the bottom there. But looking at what the comparable municipalities do and how they fund this, and how we currently fund the hydro board, but how we could go about funding other boards and commissions and standing committees. So I would ask for that referral motion.
Can I just ask Councillor Cisco to clarify, is there a time frame that it's coming back?
Well, and again, given that Councillor Littleton had put the start of the next term of council, I think it would be fair as a part of the 2023 budget. So if a report like this were able to come back in the first or second quarter of 2022, then it can be a part of the budget deliberations for that year and be forwarded and be put into place at that point. So I mean, I'm open to suggestions if people think that's too long, but I think the first or second quarter of 2022 gives us lots of time to make the decision and move forward.
Okay, perfect. So referral motion's non-debatable. Are there any questions for clarification?
Yeah, just point of clarification, Chair. Could we include, and Councillor Cisco, maybe this is adding too much, but could we include council? If we're doing a comparative study, could we include council remuneration? I know it's sort of taboo, but I'm sort of the opinion that city council members are underpaid in St. Catharines.
I have no objection to that coming forward in the report, but if that's the case, I would also like our staff to very clearly enumerate the current formula and the justification behind the formula. And
Sure.
I think it's good. One of the benefits of being in St. Catharines is we don't actually decide on our salary. The tax returns do, but it's important to get that information out. So if we can add that in there, I think that's a valuable part of the whatever report comes forward.
Perfect. Okay, are there any other questions of clarification? Who said yeah?
Me, Williamson.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you. I'd ask, to me, they're completely separate issues, and that is council remuneration and remuneration on the hydro board. So I ask that they would be split and voted on separately, please.
Okay, the only question, the only thing I want to say is this is a holding AGM that we're having right now. So realistically, if we're going to do a referral motion that Councillor Cisco's asking for, I think you can incorporate that language, but that really has nothing to do with hydro. So I think perhaps maybe even Councillor Miller, maybe we can bring that up at the next council meeting to ask about council remuneration.
Yeah, that's fine. We can remove it since it's pretty separate, and I will be bringing that forward at our next council meeting, and I will connect with the clerk's office.
Perfect. Okay, so are there any other questions for clarification or? Okay, I'm going to call the question. I'll look to the clerk, the deputy clerk.
Councillor, this is for the referral. Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
and Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, the next item is the adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting prior to starting the annual shareholder meeting? Moved by Mayor Sendzik, seconded by Councillor Townsend. All those in favor? And that's carried. City of St. Catharines is a shareholder for St. Catharines Hydro Inc. annual shareholder meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order. The waiver of notice of the annual shareholder meeting. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Kushner, seconded by Councillor Garcia. All those in favor? And that's carried. Can I ask Councillor Cisco and Councillor Miller to put their hands down? Thanks.
You could ask, but I don't have to do it.
Adoption of the agenda. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Be it resolved that the agenda for the June 7th, 2021 annual meeting of the shareholder be approved. Moved by Councillor Townsend, seconded by Councillor Sorrento. All those in favor? And that's carried. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Hearing and seeing none. Adoption of the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the annual shareholder meeting of December 8th, 2020? Be it resolved that the minutes of the annual shareholder meeting held on December 8th, 2020 be approved. Moved by Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Cisco. All those in favor? And that's carried. Item 4.2. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the special, for some reason it's repeated here. Be it resolved that the minutes of the special shareholder meeting held on December 8th, 2020 be approved. Moved by Councillor Kushner, seconded by Councillor Phillips. All in favor? And that's carried. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the special shareholder meeting of March 8th, 2021? Be it resolved that the minutes of the special shareholder meeting held on March 8th, 2021 be approved. Moved by Councillor Townsend. Seconded by Councillor Garcia. All those in favor? And that's carried. Annual Elektra update. I will now call upon Brian Bentz, President and CEO of Elektra, to provide an update on the past year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Brian? Nope.
Thank you. It's our pleasure this evening to provide you with an overview of the results of operations and financial performance for Elektra for 2020. Certainly 2020 was a year like no other, and Elektra was no exception. We had been monitoring the pandemic and the potential for pandemic late in 2019 and early into 2020, and established emergency operations on March 23rd. Staff quickly mobilized to work from home and did that quite efficiently and effectively. And throughout the pandemic, our first priority was, and always will be, on the safety, health, and wellness of our employees and the public safety of our customers and our community. During 2020, We implemented a policy not to disconnect any residential customers during the year. We waived late payment charges from March to August during the year. We directed and assisted and continue to direct and assist where possible access to government support programs for our customers, like the COVID Emergency Assistance Plan and the Low Income Emergency Assistance Plan. We advised our call center staff to be understanding and accommodating with respect to establishing payment arrangements with customers who are in arrears and going through a difficult time. We increased our donations to food banks across our service area and community giving. And due to the fact that our procurement team had proactively ordered PPE in January and February, we were able to donate supplies of N95 masks to frontline healthcare workers during the second quarter of 2020, when supplies were in short availability. We also knew that many people working from home and with children at home, learning, not in school, learning virtually, that the dependence on the reliable, safe electricity supply would be more important than ever. And to that end, we mobilized our forces and put additional emphasis on making sure that our call response was strong and that our control rooms continue to operate, monitor, and dispatch crews when there were outages on the system, all while adhering to COVID health protocols. And I'm pleased also to report that our reliability indices for the year were strong and exceeded target despite the challenges presented by COVID. So very proud of the way our organization responded and the way they responded to this crisis and tried to help our customers and our communities through it. If we have a slide deck here, if we can perhaps move to slide 3 of the deck, just summarize what we want to talk about today. And I have a number of leaders from Elektra with me here today, including John Basilio, Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, Mike Matthews, who's our Senior Vice President of Network Services, and Blair Pepperdy, our Vice President of Government Relations, who will be helping me with the presentation today. We're going to talk first about the financial performance at the year-end 2020 results, the synergies that were achieved over the course of the last 4 years, which was a major goal of the creation of Elektra, was to lower costs for the benefit of consumers and shareholders, and the dividends that have been paid to shareholders. Have a review of our capital budget and our performance in terms of the system and reliability over the course of the last year. Speak briefly about some recognition and awards that we've had, and then conclude our presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to John Basilio, our Chief Financial Officer, who will review Elektra's financial performance for 2020. John?
Thanks, Brian, and good evening, councillors. Clearly it was a very extraordinary year, I think, for all of us. But what I'm pleased to report is I think that notwithstanding, Elektra had an exceptional year. Despite COVID impacts on profitability, we missed our target by, I would say, a relatively small amount, $9 million on budgeted income of 133. So we came in at 124. And as Brian mentioned earlier, when we effectively abruptly wound down operations in March of last year and sent our employee base home, we were just coming into our first quarter forecast. And at that time, we were forecasting being about $31 million below budget. Obviously, a lot of uncertainty on some key things like our revenues, particularly with respect to our commercial customers, essential businesses being shut down, the impact on loads. Capital projects, we halted our capital projects. So our labor and materials were going directly to the bottom line as expenses. And credit losses, we were very concerned about our customers' ability to pay. And through the year, and with that in mind, we did see some improvement in the COVID outlook. Energy demand, we thought it would be down about 10% on the year, but with some uplift, a modest uplift of economic activity, loads were down on the year by 5 to 6%, which had about a $9 million impact on revenue. We were able to commence our capital projects again early in June, so we wound operations back up. And as Mike will report in a moment, we were able to largely achieve our capital budget on the year with appropriate allocation of wages and whatnot to capital, giving income a lift. But what we saw is that our customer payment arrears were much higher than what we expected in the first quarter. And so there were much higher levels of credit losses, about 5 times what we'd expect in the year, about $23 million compared to a usual annual average of about $5 million. And so COVID impacts did end up being about $30 million on the year, but we had a good uplift from our competitive businesses. We're here to talk to you. We've been talking to you that obviously today. They're performed well ahead of plan, gave a lift to income. We disposed of our Sandalwood Operations Center. We're consolidating 2 operation centers into one on Kennedy Road in Brampton. That provided a gain of about $7 million. And our conservation programs, although the province has effectively canceled the Conservation First framework, we still recover some trailing revenues as they affect, as they have implication or distribution revenues. So that and some other regulatory recoveries and lower interest rates allowed us to narrow the gap from about a $30 million COVID impact on the year to $9 million relative to budget. So overall, a very good year. And if we could move 2 slides forward, please. So this is year 4 of Elektra, and what this chart is supposed to show is that the merger has been an incredible success. The basis for the merger was to take costs out of the system, to realize synergies. What this slide portrays is that we're ahead operating net synergies about 20 million ahead of the business case cumulative over the 4-year period. And if you look at the blue line, the last 2 data points to the right, that 122 where we are now versus 75 a year ago, the difference is $47 million of sustained synergies. We had a target going into the merger of 52.5 million, and we're almost there. We didn't expect to get all the way there in 2020, but we're very, very close. And so promise made on the merger, promise delivered in the synergies. Next slide, please. So these are the dividends that we've paid. There's also 2016 comparative, but over the last 4 years. And we reported last year that we're about $10 million ahead of our merger business case plan. And regrettably, we're about $10 million lower when we look across the 4-year period. And there are 2 elements contributing to that. The first is COVID. Obviously, we didn't hit our target this year, we're short. But the second are the headwinds that Brian spoke about earlier. Headwinds as a result of regulatory implementation of regulatory policies that are making it very difficult to recover capital, incremental capital, and we had expected that through the merger based on the Ontario Energy Board's policies. And additionally, government policy changes as they affect conservation and demand management, and the imposition of some additional regulatory costs are significant elements that are affecting revenues, and largely the headwinds. So obviously that speaks to the importance of the strategy 2.0 and the growth strategy itself to try and build back up value through growing the enterprise. If we could move back to slide 6, please, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mike Matthews to talk a little bit about the capital program in 2020.
Thanks, John.
Sorry, slide 6. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
Thanks, John, and greetings, members of council. I'll give a quick overview of our capital program. As John alluded to, with the outbreak of COVID, we did ramp down our field activity in the months of March, April, and May. But then we started to ramp back up with both our contractors and field crews in June and through the balance of the year. So despite the fact that we had, a slowdown in capital work in that second quarter of 2020, we were really able to ramp things up and really do a great job in getting work done safely and efficiently over the balance of the year. And so we ended up achieving a capital expenditure of $281 million on a budget of $302 million. So great work to adjust and get that capital program completed over the balance of the year. We did see some deferrals in works. John alluded to our operations center that we're building in Brampton on Kennedy Road. Due to COVID, there was some delays in that project and deferral to this year. And also we did see some deferral of road authority, road widening projects, and transit projects, predominantly by Metrolinx in the Mississauga-York region area. But what we were able to do is recognizing those slowdowns in those areas, is we were able to shift work to our system renewal. Aging cable, which has been installed predominantly in the 1970s and 1980s, is becoming a large issue for us from a reliability aspect. And so we were able to shift an extra $15 million worth of capital to accelerate a replacement program of our cable, which increases or at least keeps our reliability steady and moving forward. So if we could move to slide 10. And I'll just talk a little focus on some of the work we're doing in St. Catharines with respect to capital. In the slide, I'll go into a little more detail than that's on the slide. We are investing $250 million per year across our service territory. And in St. Catharines alone, we're looking at $45 to $50 million over the next 5 years. On the slide, we speak about the cable, which I alluded to, $7 million in cable replacement over the next 5 years. In addition to that, we're also rehabilitating more cable to the tune of $4 million. This is where instead of replacing the cable, we're able to rehabilitate that cable. But on top of that, we're also investing in the overhead system and the system in general, $2 million in transformer replacements, $10 million in overhead system rebuilds and pole replacements. There's $1.5 million to convert rear lot overhead service to front yard underground service on the Riverview Boulevard area. We've got $8 million in new feeder circuits, 2 coming from Bunting TS and another in the Linwell Road and Lake Street area. And then we're also spending another $10 million to modernize the grid and modernize the system by putting in system automation. And that includes this year in itself installing 26 remote controlled switches in the St. Catharines area alone. Just another update. I know some of you have been involved and had some dealings with electrical contractors who we've been working with to improve our service when it comes to new connections and upgrades and the whole application process. We worked with a group of electrical contractors through late last year and continue to do so this year and consult with them on how we can improve our online portal, the application process, and we've made those improvements. We still have plans to make further improvements to that area. And we also increased resources in our call center so that they could more effectively respond to phone calls and inquiries from our electrical contractors. So an area that we know that we did struggle with over the last couple of years, but I think we've made good gains in making improvements to those areas. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Brian.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to ask Blair Peverty to outline some of our community support initiatives over the past year and looking forward into 2021. Blair?
Thank you, Brian, and good evening, everyone. As we've talked about through these presentations, the pandemic and COVID really caused us to redirect our attention on multiple levels, including our community support. So in 2020, we shifted our giving to COVID relief programs, specifically to help frontline workers and food banks. And so that program is carrying on into 2021 with some updating that reflect what's going on around us in our society. And so we have a $1 million fund that we dedicate to community support across the service territory. In 2021, we will be continuing to focus on pandemic relief, and that is underway now, both through support to regional hospitals, as well as a major initiative we've got going to convert people over to paperless billing, and that we are using or offering a major donation to the Frontline Fund, which supports doctors and nurses and frontline workers in hospitals when they're coming off shift, if they need a place to stay, that kind of thing. So, and that campaign is going extremely well. Anti-racism, of course, is a major issue facing us all. Elektra has a very proactive equity, diversity, and inclusion program, but we have, through this particular Elektra Cares program focused on anti-racism, we've spoken to the municipalities about getting their advice on which groups in their communities are working in this area that we can support, and we have reached out and are continuing to reach out and donate funds to local groups who are working on anti-racism agendas. And with that in mind, we initiated a scholarship through DeGroote McMaster's Director College, where it'll be an Elektra scholarship for a BIPOC candidate living in our service territory who can gain admission to the McMaster program. We will pay for the tuition for that person, and that we will be making that announcement with McMaster shortly. And we expect the first candidate to enter the program in January 2022. And incorporating employee choice was something we wanted to do to make sure that we were getting feedback from our employees on this program, and we've done that and made some adjustments. Next slide, please. This is a little bit more detail on the financial investments we've made in St. Catherine, and I won't go over them individually. There is one here that Norm mentioned earlier that was actually from 2020 that I will mention again, and that was the mask cleaner, N95 mask cleaner that was donated to Niagara Health. That was an $85,000 investment. And one more that isn't on here because it's very new, but Norm did mention it as well, is that our involvement with the 2022 Canada Games in Niagara. There will be a formal announcement coming on that later this month with the Games and Elektra, but we have committed to become the official energy supplier of the Games and have put, I think it's a great investment of both rooftop solar and other assets into the Henley Rowing Center in particular. So watch for that. That'll be announced later this month. And the next slide, please. Excuse me. And our ongoing communications to our municipal partners through our Ally newsletter. That comes out quarterly. You should have had one in May. And again, the customer newsletters that go out quarterly, primarily through email to customers right across the service territory. So with that, Brian, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Blair. If we can move to the next slide. Just want to next, please. Just want to close with some recognitions and awards that the organization received in 2020, starting with the Corporate Knights Best Corporate Citizen. This recognizes companies, large companies across Canada with in excess of $1 billion in revenue, looking at their community involvement, their board diversity, sustainability, and workplace safety. Elektra was on the top 50 and in fact ranked third in Canada amongst that group on those criteria. So we're very proud of that achievement. as well as the Smart Elektra Power Alliance. We are the first Canadian utility to win this award. It's a US-based award recognizing innovation at Elektra, including our work around EV charging at home and at work, and our microgrid initiatives. We also had one of our young leaders recognized as a top 30 under 30, again, on having a positive impact on innovation in the energy sector and climate change. And we won the Electricity Distributor Association Environmental Excellence Award for the sustainability targets that we have achieved, which includes 1,500 tons of GHG reduction emissions, 15% since 2016. Next slide, please. Some of the other community involvement involves programs like Walk a Mile in Our Shoes. We were the top fundraising team for that 2020 walk. Conestoga College Co-op Employer of Distinction, recognizing our support and contribution to Conestoga's co-op program, specifically engineering technical students, and our Plug and Drive award from the Canadian Electricity Association, recognizing our work in e-mobility. Next slide. We're once again proud to announce in advance that we will be on the Corporate Knights Award as one of the top 50, and also on Canada's Clean 50. We had a leader as one of the Clean 50 sustainable leaders on environmental issues. So we're very happy about that. And finally, we won another award on the EDA Communications Excellence, recognizing employee communications programs during COVID 2019. So in conclusion, Mr. Chair and Council, we are pleased to report that notwithstanding the challenges of COVID in 2020, especially as they relate to revenue issues, lower revenue being consumed, and credit losses that were incurred, we were able to achieve close to budgeted net income. And I think John mentioned it was about a $30 million impact of COVID on our net income. Our budgeted net income was 132 million. We came in about 9 million under that at 123, notwithstanding that $30 million impact. But more importantly, the organization focused on each other's health and well-being so that we're in a position to support our customers and our communities through a very difficult and challenging time. And we'd like to thank the council and the board at St. Catharines for supporting us not only through the merger, but over the course of the past year and a half, which has been challenging, but brighter days ahead. With that, Mr. Chair, that is our report. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you, Brian, and your team. You guys have been tremendous in supporting St. Catharines, from helping out community care to the YWCA, to the Niagara Peninsula Children's Center, to the actual donations of the masks, and now the Canada Summer Games. So you've had a big impact on St. Catharines. So seeing no questions, I'll look to a councillor to have a councillor move a motion to receive the annual update. Councillor Porter, seconded by Councillor Townsend. All those in favor? And that's carried. So I guess I'm going to look to the deputy clerk. Do the representatives from Elektra need to stay on the call since we're doing, can we let them go?
There are no other agenda items that include Elektra.
Perfect. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 6, annual resolutions, the audited financial statements. Can I have a councillor move the resolution, please? I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Garcia. Be it resolved that the audited financial statements, including the balance sheet as of December 31st, 2020, and the statement of profit and loss for the fiscal year of the corporation ended on such a date, are hereby received. And I'll look to I have a mover and a seconder, and I'll look to the deputy clerk for a recorded vote.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
and Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
That's carried.
Item 6.2, appointment of the auditor. Can I have a councillor move the resolution, please? Councillor or Mayor Senzik, seconded by Councillor Dodge. Be it resolved that the appointment of the auditor of the corporation be the same firm chosen by the corporation of the city of St. Catharines pursuant to their required selection process and authorizing the directors to fix the auditor's remuneration. I'll look to the deputy clerk if there's not any questions. Seeing none, I'll look to the deputy clerk to call the recorded vote.
Mayor Senzik,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
and Councillor Harris.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Item 7, 2021 to 2025 business plan. Can I have a councillor move the staff recommendation? Councillor Williamson, seconded by Councillor Miller. Be it resolved that the 2021-2025 business plan be approved as presented. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I'll look to the deputy clerk for the recorded vote.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
That's carried.
Confirmation of all acts. Can I have a councillor move the following motion? Councillor Littleton, seconded by Councillor Cisco. Be it resolved that all acts, contracts, proceedings, appointments, bylaws, elections, and payments enacted, made, done, given, and taken by the directors, the officers of the corporation since the date of the last annual meeting of the shareholder, as the same are set out or referred to in the minutes of the corporation or in the financial statements submitted to this meeting, be and the same and hereby approved, sanctioned, and confirmed. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll look to the deputy clerk for the recorded vote.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Cisco,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Williamson,
Yes.
Councillor Harris,
Yes.
and Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
Okay,
That's
so I'm
carried.
going to ask for a motion to adjourn, but everybody has to remember, following the adjournment, council will proceed to the special council agenda item 6. So I need a mover and a seconder to move to adjourn the annual general meeting. Moved by Mayor Senzik, seconded by Councillor Cisco. All those in favor? And now we're moving, so don't hang up or anything. We're going to go into the other meeting. So I guess Mayor Senzik, you'll.
Yes. So for this one, we have a reading of the bylaw. We have a motion that the bylaws listed on council agenda be read for first time, considered and passed. Bylaw to authorize the execution of shareholder resolutions passed by the annual shareholder meeting and special shareholder meeting of St. Catharines Hydro Inc. One reading with respect to the St. Catharines shareholder meeting, and a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its special meeting held on the 7th day of June 2021, and that they be signed and executed by the mayor and the city clerk. So I just need a motion. Councillor Phillips and Councillor Kushner seconding it. All in favor? That wasn't me, that's carried. And we now have an adjournment. So motion to adjourn, Councillor Harris, second by Councillor Cisco.
Sorry it took so long.
us
That was
your
my longest
puppy.
meeting.
Show us the puppy.
2 hours. Yeah. Good night, everyone.
There she is. There's the one who's causing all the problems. He is the problem causer right now. All right.
One of you.